Army building. It's an interesting part about the toy collecting behavior and hobby. I mean, one could say army building starts with plastic green army men soldiers that we all had as a kid. I mean, that's definitely building an army, right? And of course, you can go even further back and you can look at the small metal or wooden army soldiers that have been sold for the last several hundred years. This was one of the most popular ways kids played in the 17 and 1800s, was by assembling small armies to, well, replicate the armies that they saw in real life, or at least their parents maybe read about in newspapers, or maybe their parents were even in the army. And it was a way of having a little bit of that at home. Either way, army building has been a huge part of the toy industry for many, many years, and it even goes back to Roman and Greek times, when toy soldiers were given to kids as their primary plaything. Kids obviously didn't have as many toys back then, so having one toy soldier might be the greatest thing a kid could have. And metal soldiers are just as popular, well, okay, they are popular today, just like they were for the last 200 years, but for the most part today, they tend to be collected by adults who display them, who put them into dioramas that they spend hours and hours, if not days and weeks, creating in order to literally recreate famous battles. And these are more living pieces of art than they are toys. They tend to get placed on the shelf and never used again. That sounds like a behavior I know. All right, let's get back to toys. So, army building. Is this something that kids do, or is it exclusively an adult collector expression and, I guess, well, interest, for lack of a better word? Obviously, army building has a strong photogenic presence, like when Jack's Pacific put tons of stormtroopers all over the Great Wall of China as part of a promotion for Episode 7. Obviously makes a great image and a stunning PR move. But for the adult collector, those who buy the same figure over and over and over again, I mean, the question of why is obvious. People want to have an army. But the real question is this something that kids also do? Well, and a lot of people look at something like Smurfs as an army that kids buy, but it really isn't a good example because Smurfs are all unique. I mean, yes, there are a few that look alike, but for the most part, soldiers and Smurfs aren't really the same thing. Okay, well, there are Smurf soldiers, but that's not the point. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that Smurfs aren't really army building the way they are with metal soldiers or wood soldiers from the 17 and 1800s, because Smurfs are all unique, and they're more about expressing one's hobby or the love one has for a specific type of character, like a pirate or a knight or a guy holding a board and a saw. Other lines, like Lord of the Rings, that really do naturally fit with the army building presence, it's still a little different because while they sold army packs where you could buy, say, multiple orcs in one purchase, all those orcs tended to be different. It wasn't getting the same exact orc in the same pose or even in the same armor over and over again. You were still getting, if you will, unique characters. So while it's army building, it's different from the way, say, Star Wars army building is done in the adult collector community, where people will buy literally the same exact figure over and over and over again in order to build out a diorama of a huge amount of figures. And this is very different from how kids play. So with kids, and let's keep with the Star Wars example here, when they're offered the opportunity to get a figure, maybe it's a stormtrooper or snowtrooper, either way, and then they're also offered the opportunity to get an alien, while they might want to buy the trooper, they're also just as interested in getting the alien character. And then the opportunity to buy a second trooper, and let's say it's the same one. Okay, I mean, in this case, I'm going to use a stormtrooper as an example as opposed to a snowtrooper. But case in point, if they already own a stormtrooper, the chance of them owning more than one stormtrooper is less than one would think. Because kids want variety. Kids want difference. Even if there might be tons of the same character in a scene or a movie, As Azim says, Allah loves wondrous variety, and so do children. It's the way children collect, whether it's Hot Wheels or Star Wars. And it's why in the vintage line you didn't see things like giant packs of all stormtroopers. All of the multi-packs tended to have all different characters to play out a whole scene. And while kids would see things like hundreds of stormtroopers or clone troopers on screen at the same time, the desire to own multiple versions of the same character like they would with little green army men isn't really the same, because to them, Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or any of these new properties aren't really about building an army, they're about playing in a world. And Star Wars has attempted to replicate this play pattern that is for Green Army Men. I mean, they literally have made Green Army Men out of Star Wars characters. There was a line at retail for a while called Command, which literally was Green Army Men. I mean, they weren't green, they were different colored, but they were non-articulated, plastic, pre-posed versions of Star Wars characters. And there were ships as well, and I think there was a game involved too, but for the most part, kids would just ideally play them like Green Army Men. And to be blatant, it wasn't successful. It didn't do well. If it did, it would still be on shelf. It pretty much only had a one-season life because it wasn't embraced by kids, because this is not the way kids play Star Wars, as, just one brand example. Kids, while they see an army of, stormtroopers or rebels or clones or droids, whatever it is on screen, while that's entertaining, when they actually play with the toys, they want a variety of characters. So even when Hasbro has taken things like clone troopers and sold them in a pack using the form factor of 3 3/4 to go along with, the rest of the line, not like what the Green Army Men figures were, which were minis. So even packs like this, which were put out at retail aimed at kids, these even sold poorly. So it wasn't just the scale, it was the idea that a pack of all of the same character is not something that appeals to children. So while other packs have been done of the same character, even with slight deco changes or rank changes, if you will, these have, for the most part, always been done aimed at the adult collector through mail-away or online retailers. Selling them at retail, like they did with those Clone Trooper packs or the Green Army Men Command packs, has not led to success, and it's been done over and over again to the point that it can pretty much, fundamentally be said and proven by sales that it doesn't work. Kids don't like to purchase Star Wars this way. Now, I'm not saying 100% of the time. Obviously, there's exceptions, but while kids do love Troopers, and believe me, Troopers are some of the best-selling figures, for most kids, one is enough, which is why a single-packed, boxed figure is enough to satisfy their desire for a Stormtrooper. The same thing works for Marvel Legends. So while kids might want to get, an AIM trooper, if you will, having one of them is kind of enough. Even this 2-pack that had an AIM soldier paired with a higher-ranking AIM soldier or, a slightly different version, still was only sold at stores like GameStop and alternate retailers. It wasn't at, Target and Walmart. In fact, the AIM Trooper's later release or current release is only on Hasbro Pulse. So only going online and purchasing it are you able to buy multiples of the same generic soldier. And the reason this sells really well to adults is because, much like the metal soldiers from the beginning of the video, adult collectors display their figures. They want to recreate battles and scenes and armies. So whether it's AIM soldiers or other Marvel characters like the Hellfire Guards, they're also sold pretty much exclusively online. If they sold well to kids, if kids purchased figures in this way, in this behavior, where they wanted to army build, you would see them at retail. And those examples we looked at with Star Wars are sort of proof in the pudding that kids don't collect this way, because every time Star Wars tried doing that at retail, it didn't work. Yet collectors love buying figures this way. And again, it's the exact same reason that the adults who still collect metal soldiers are interested in them, because the payoff, the emotional connection, is recreating scenes directly out of beloved comic books. Or, in the case of the historic figures, scenes directly out of famous battles, being able to have an accurate Battle of Gettysburg, for example, and being able to recreate it down to, exactly where the sandbags were piled up, and, where every soldier was, and, who was, how many, were in the trenches and how many were on, the other side. Recreating this exact battle, well, here it is with an adult collector for Marvel. This is the same exact emotional connection, and therefore the same buying habit of wanting to have an army of characters. And it's something when I was at Mattel on Masters of the Universe Classics we really embraced, because we knew this line was not aimed at kids. Yeah, it was great if kids were going to get into it and get past the figures by adults, but you had to be 18 plus to make a purchase on Matty Collector. So, and it's labeled right there, adult collector figure, right on the package. And we really, really embraced this buying habit, which is, for the most part, exclusive to the adult collector, and put out quite a lot of army builders. In fact, some people could even use the alternate heads that came with figures, like Merman, to create their own army of Mer people to be commanded by Merman. And that's just as valid as the multi-packs we put out of things like Horde Troopers. Knowing that this is how the adult collector collects, we were able to really, pardon the phrase, but lean into this buying behavior and really maximize it for the benefit of the collector, knowing that they wanted to army build. Horde Troopers were put out initially as a 2-pack, one with battle damage, one without, and then later on a single version of the unbattle damage, the one without battle damage, was put out, and ideally it was supposed to be put out at the same time as a character that actually came with alternate heads for it. There was a little, after I left Mattel, the timing wasn't perfect by the new team, but it did get put out so that the new heads had a base to put them on. And again, while there are kids who will buy figures this way and will want a entire legion to face down He-Man, in the vintage days with the Horde Trooper and He-Man from the 80s, this is not a behavior that kids really embrace. They much prefer variety. And with the exception of things like Green Army Men, which, although they all look the same in a way, it really is variety because you're getting all sorts of different soldiers. Your bazooka guy, your minesweeper, your commander. But it is about buying an entire army, and you know what you're getting into. When you're into a toy line like Star Wars or He-Man or Lord of the Rings, kids want variety. And even today, collectors still are into buying multiples of the same figure and finding new ways to make this happen. Whether they want to have an entire army of, humans that have the same uniform, or they want to embrace the dark side. Army building is all about the emotional payoff of having it all, of having an entire army. And it's something that really is exclusive to the adult collector. While we have seen toy companies experiment over and over again with ways to bring army building as a buying experience to children, every time they do, it just doesn't work at retail. Kids prefer not to have multiples of the same figure, but to have different characters in that world. They do love army members. They'll buy a clone trooper, but they're really not interested in getting multiples clone troopers in the same pack. If they were, you would still see these at retail because they would sell. We'll still have army builders available, but you're going to see this more and more offered online because it's how adult collectors collect. We love to have an entire army. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to see more like it, let me know. Subscribe and give it a thumbs up, because that's what tells YouTube to share it with more people, and that's what this is all about, sharing toy love. Leave a comment below, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.